Over the past week, Nebraska farmers made significant advances bringing in the 2017 crop. USDA's latest progress report shows soybean growers are now 2/3 complete with harvest, double the amount they were the previous week. The state's corn producers are just more than a quarter finished. Over the past 5 years at this point, they were half done. To discuss storage considerations for that grain over the short term and long run, we recently talked with North Dakota State Extension Ag Engineer Ken Hellevang. We started by asking Ken for some general rules of thumb when it comes to storing corn.
Well, storing corn isn't really any different than storing any of our other types of grains, and so we come back to the fundamentals. We need to make sure that that grain is dry, at least dry enough for storage for the period of time that we're expecting to store it. And then we need to be concerned about the quality of that corn. Are we starting out with whole kernels? I'm getting some reports that we're seeing more breakage of the kernels this year. That's going to make it more susceptible to harvest losses and storage losses. The other thing then is making sure that we're controlling the temperature, cooling that grain as rapidly as we can to enhance the storage life.
When you see problems with storage, how do they generally occur?
Well, we'll typically encourage farmers and storage managers to monitor grain temperature. And by following that grain trend, we can sometimes pick up when we're starting to have storage problems. Another tool that is relatively new on the scene is monitoring the carbon dioxide level. And both insect activity and spoilage produces carbon dioxide. So by monitoring that within the storage, we can kind of get an indication. Still go back to the old, go in there and look for insects, look for indications of crusting, look for moisture condensing on walls, the typical things that we've been doing for years.
How does crusting occur, Ken?
Crusting typically is going to occur either because we're having moisture dripping off of the roof back onto the top of the corn pile, or we end up with a temperature variation within the grain mass. If we're not cooling the corn as the outside temperatures cool down, we get convection currents that then create that moisture accumulation in the top of the bin.
Is there a maximum amount of time that you can be storing this grain? And that probably is applicable to any corn that might be left over to last year too.
There really isn't a maximum storage time if our management is up to par. That means that we need to be making sure that the corn has been dry, and for long-term storage we're really thinking of 14% moisture or less, preferably down in that 13.5% moisture, and then making sure that we're keeping the grain cool. If we have it dry, have it cold, then we can store multiple years. But storage life is cumulative, so if we use up a fair amount of that storage life because the moisture contents are too high, grain temperature becomes too warm, then we're looking at maybe just a little over a year or even less than a year, depending on conditions.
What should your expectations be about storing grain outside in a pile?
I really discourage trying to store corn or any type of grain in a pile. Just a 1-inch rainfall on a pile, if we're concentrating that in the top foot, will raise the moisture content by 9 percentage points. So we can start out with 15% moisture, just a single 1-inch rain, and we're up to 24-25% moisture and problems. So anything that's going to be stored in a pile needs all of the same principles that we think about for any other storage. Aeration, prepared surface, some type of cover over the pile to keep the moisture out.